What's up? It's LOLO BX. On this episode of
Just the tip.
I'm going to give you 5 tips on beating writer's block.
LOLO BX.
I've also typed out all of these pointers in more detail in a blog post, which will be linked below. Tip 1. There is no writer's block. It's usually something else. Fear, hesitation, or overwhelm, or overthinking things, focusing too much on the end result rather than starting the process. There's a good book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. He goes over a lot of things, most of which are based on resistance and things that hinder artists in their creative process. He says that an amateur thinks he has to overcome his fear before he starts creating, but the professional understands that the fear never goes away. He has to start creating to overcome it. Basically, you're not going to be able to write anything unless you put yourself in the position to write music. That involves simple steps of setting aside an hour to write music, turning the computer on, sitting down and starting, whether that's hitting a single note on a keyboard, whether it's dragging in a sample or a loop to chop up, or using a reference track that I'll talk about later. Writer's block comes from overthinking, so stop overthinking, stop putting so much pressure on yourself to produce something in the end. Focus on what's in front of you right now, which is just turning on your computer and starting.
Do it.
Tip 2, improve your music skills. This might be a bit disheartening and it's not exactly an instant hack, but from my personal experience, I started out in music as a guitarist. I used to write loads of songs on guitar as I was growing up, and that really helps me today with my electronic music writing because I just know how to write music by ear. I'm not an amazing musician by any means. My music theory knowledge is pretty limited. As I said, I used to write most of my music by ear, and I still do. Sometimes you just have to sharpen your skills, and the only way to do that is by practicing over and over. So it might suck when you start writing music, but the best thing to do is to just write as much as you can. It might be shitty music, it might be shitty melodies, but just practice. And if you need to practice on things like chord progressions or melodies in particular, you might want to set aside half an hour, 45 minutes on purely writing melodies and just write as many as you can, purely as a practice exercise. The same with writing harmonies and chord progressions. Do some study, do some Udemy courses, do some YouTube courses. This is probably the tip that you didn't want to hear, but it's the tip that I gave. I'm sorry. You just got to practice.
Oh God.
Tip number 3. It's a pretty common one. You've probably heard it before. Go outside. Do something other than sit in your studio trying to write music. Whether that's exercise, go for a run, go for a jog. A jog is a run. Go for a bike ride, walk the dog, go and sit in the sun, go and read a book. Anything other than sitting down trying to force music out of your head. This will just sort of give your subconscious time to reset. You might have an idea along the way. You might hear a song on the radio or on Spotify or whatever on the way to the gym that gives you a few ideas. You never know. This also helps with step 1, the overthinking and the overwhelm thing. Just taking the pressure off yourself. This is why a lot of successful people, not only artists, start their day with either meditation and or exercise or a workout, because they get their juices flowing. They don't worry. They're not focusing on what they have to do. They're trying to get their endorphins racing. Whatever else happens when you exercise, you come back, usually get a few ideas and you sit down nice and refreshed. That's that. Tip number 4. This one's pretty important and probably the most instant hack, if you will. I think it's pretty foolproof, at least it is for me. It is start with a reference track. Like, everyone knows it's pretty daunting to open up your DAW, your DAW, whatever you want to call it, and stare at a blank screen. You're like, all right, there's so many decisions that you're faced with, and ultimately that's what songwriting is, making thousands of decisions one by one. That's why it can be overwhelming if you're focusing on them all at once rather than one at a time. So you open up a blank DAW, damn, like what BPM am I going to use? What key am I going to write it in? What feeling am I going for? Am I going to start with an intro, a drop? Am I going to start with a melody or a drum loop? Or what kick sample am I going to use? What snare am I going to use? There's just so many things. Find a reference track that you're vibing with, whether it's yours or someone else's. It's not copying anyone, because all you're doing is dragging it in. Write something on top of it, whether it's a drum loop or a groove in the breakdown, or you might want to write your own little melody on top of the intro, over the drop, over the breakdown, whatever. Basically, it gives you a starting point, whether that be a tempo, a key, whatever. You might just write like a little 4 to 8 bar melody on top of that song, and that's enough to kickstart your song. And then you just remove the reference track, continue on and build step by step. Like I said, don't get overwhelmed with how many steps there are ahead. Just focus on the one that you're at, and there you go. Tip number 5. If all else fails, and let's face it, we all have bad days, whether we're a musician or an artist or a writer, anyone for that matter, everyone has bad days at work, everyone has less productive days at work. There is a last resort And a way that you can make this day or this studio session matter and keep things productive is to turn it into a sound design or sample organization day.
Okay.
So you don't have to think about writing a song. You've got no pressure on yourself to create anything at all. You might just want to mess around in Serum or Massive or whatever soft synth that you prefer. Go through your sample library, find 5 or 10 of your favorite kicks from folders that you've never even looked at before, organize them into a favorites folder, create a few sampler instruments or instrument racks, however your DAW works. You might want to search YouTube, do some rocket powered sound Serum tutorials, bro.
Yeah.
You're still being productive. It might not feel like it, but you're going to build that library. Over time, you'll experience less writer's block in the moment because you'll have this whole library full of samples or patches or whatever else. You're really setting yourself up for the future. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and there might not be any instant gratification in this step, but it will help you over the long run, and it will also help you hone in on your own sound because you're building yourself a library that you can reference again and again, and it will become a common theme throughout your music. And that's it. If this episode helped you at all, remember to leave a like, subscribe, because there's a heap more on the way. If you've got any other ideas, requests, any comments, anything that you have found helps you with writer's block, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to chat about it. If you've got any other ideas for future videos, let me know as well. Share it with a friend if you think it will help. Until next time, peace.